Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Now What episode podcast with Lifehouse. We're really excited for our first guest of season 2. His name is Tim. Welcome, Tim.
Hi.
Really excited to have you. Thank you so much. So, going back to last week's episode, we kind of introduced a variety of topics that we want to touch upon through this season. And so we're going to kick off our series called The Road Less Traveled. We're going to be interviewing multiple professionals in different industries. So you guys are going to get a really good idea of what's out there career-wise. And we're really excited because Tim has a big job in programming, IT, a lot of experience in that sector. So I actually learned a lot just from our initial conversation. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to hear more from him. But with that, we can go ahead and get started. So, Tim, if you can just give us a little bit of background on what you do in your career now, and we're going to go back into the progression, but just kind of like painting the picture of your current role.
So I am a programmer in a fintech company. So we make applications that if you were to go into a bank, this would be the software that the teller would be working on. So we make a lot of that kind of technology, as well as a lot of programs that just transfer data from point A to point B. In the fintech world, everybody kind of does their own thing. So we play as the middleman. So it's a lot of communicating from one thing to another.
Awesome. Okay, so now that we have a little bit more of an idea of what your current role is, what was your dream job growing up? Has it kind of changed, or were you always interested in the programming computer science world?
Growing up, I always wanted to be a game designer. I grew up as a little kid playing a game. I wanted to make them, and kind of picked up programming simply because that's one way to make a game, and dedicated all my time learning to programming specifically to make a game. The fact that I ended up in fintech is just chance.
Yeah, and that's a really cool concept, kind of being able to pursue a career in something that you had a passion on growing up. I think that's a really important message, that there's so much out there, you can really kind of tailor your path to your interests. So that's awesome to hear. So just going into kind of your high school experience, because our audience is made up of high schoolers. So I know we talked about kind of there being a lack of programming classes and education. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that experience was for you?
So my school only had like one computer class, and the idea behind the class was you were supposed to get certified in like Word and Excel, and you take these little tests at the end, get your little certificates. However, while I was in the class, I noticed they had a programming book in the back, and I had asked the teacher about it. And the teacher had talked about how a few years earlier they had tried a programming class, and just nobody was able to pick it up. It was just too difficult. Everybody just had trouble learning it, and they just gave up on it entirely. So the programming book was just sitting there with no use for years, and the teacher offered that I could take it. And back then, it was before you could just go to YouTube to learn how to program. So there was no boot camp, there was no guidelines for how to learn. Being able to get a book on the topic, like it was no different than like a math book. It was just a school textbook. And I took that home and I read it from beginning to end. And, it was this, 500-page, book. And I found a little compiler to be able to, write programs with. And I just made a bunch of silly little things where it was just like, 5 plus 3 equals 7 and get it to write on the screen type of thing. So super simple stuff initially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a really important message as well, just kind of showing students that they can not only just do these subjects that were taught in school, it's kind of like the core subjects, and you don't really progress too far beyond that when you're in high school. I think it's really cool that you were able to take initiative and study something that you're really interested in, and like find your own path in that. Would you kind of give that piece of advice, just like understand your own interests and take that initiative into finding ways to achieve your goals?
Yeah. And, a lot of people, at least at the start, they learn basically what the teacher teaches them. But I mean, when you're in school, you are given a school book. If you're able to teach yourself from the school book rather than the teacher, then you can take that skill and apply it elsewhere. You can buy a school book for a class that you haven't taken, and you can basically learn what that class would have taught you. Which, being poor, being able to basically learn without having to pay a lot of money for all these classes, just get the books themselves.
Yeah.
Extremely easy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting concept too. I think that sometimes the traditional path, and that's some of the topics we're really going to be getting into with this road less traveled concept. Like, you don't have to go to college right after high school. There's so many different paths you can take, and I think it's really cool that you were able to kind of forge your own way in that sense. Um, so yeah, kind of transitioning. So once you started getting a basis for programming, what were your next steps through high school towards beginning your professional career?
So I honestly was so dead focused on making a game that I didn't transition into the programming field for quite a while. My first job was as a dishwasher. The one thing I had going for me is that I always had a very strong work ethic. So every job that I had would always give me a great recommendation for the next one. My first job as a dishwasher, I knew I was moving to Gainesville in a year, and I put in my resignation literally on my second day of work. And they were like, you only have to do this like a week in advance. So I was like, no, I good. I know exactly what I'm putting, and this is what I'm doing. And the benefit of that was that when I made it to the end of that term, that I was able to say, hey, before I leave, can you please train me on all these other things? And they knew me as a good worker. We had a good repertoire, so they knew I wasn't just trying to steal everyone's job position. So they trained me in all the different positions, which meant that when I did move to the other to Gainesville, I had a job within a week of getting here, because when I put in applications, they saw, hey, he's got all of this experience in food. Now, granted, if you could do that in tech, it would have been a lot nicer, but it did
Right.
help me there. And then from there, I again worked, very good worker. So the person that I worked for, when they heard a game design opportunity around, they came to me for it immediately and was like, you have to apply. Here's an opening. But yeah, I got a very late start as a result.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of students struggle with as well. And I've had my own personal experience with. I think all of these companies that you apply for in these positions, they all need you to have experience, and that's what they need to see from you. But sometimes it's hard to get an opportunity to get that experience because you don't have any experience. That was kind of a mouthful, but if you know what I'm saying. So I think you really just at the start of your career and job journey, you just like being so willing to work hard and just put yourself out there in whatever industry, job, position that you could do is just so important. And I did want to ask if you had any kind of just advice. I think students hear all the time, like, work hard. It's so important through any job, class, anything you're doing. Just always like put in the work and you'll achieve great things. But do you have any specific tips in what helped you form that work ethic? Like any things that you kept very consistent, that you could share with our audience?
Well, I'd say as a kid, I always knew people who would they would take a job and they'd get fired from the job, and I think I always had that fear when I first started that I was going to get fired from the job if I didn't, put up my best foot forward. And turns out, it's, hate to say it, but it's ridiculously difficult for people to get fired. There are people who are terrible workers who don't get fired. But it's when you do put your best foot forward and you do put in the work ethic, people do notice it, and people want good things for you because you are, always there, always showing up as your best. And I always thought about it as, if this person was to talk to the next employer that I try to get, that what would they say? So I've just always been very future oriented. So anything I had, it was always, how is this going to get me to my goal? And the answer is never being lazy. It was never not showing up and doing my best.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great mindset to have, being future oriented. I think that's been kind of a learning curve for me personally. I think you can start that hard work and dedication through your classes in high school, and I definitely did that. And then me being on the college path, I have done a lot of more involvement opportunities, not really jobs necessarily in my earlier undergraduate years. And I think just understanding that the people that I work with in my class projects or my different organizations that I get involved in, like, this is going to be a network that lasts me, and I want to be able to put my best foot forward with them and kind of practice those work habits. Obviously, it's not your actual job, but I think I really understood how big of a difference it makes for myself, even in the people around me when I'm like completely putting my best foot forward and my all into everything. So I think that's a great lesson. And I really like what you said about being future oriented too. It's just important to look ahead. Obviously, it's not always certain, but great mindset of you to have. Kind of transitioning again. So you told us about your first job at the restaurant. Could you tell us more about how you turned your learning from the textbook in high school and some of the videos? I know you filmed some YouTube tutorials that you were able to show to your employer. Can you tell us how you turned those experiences into your first real job in programming?
So that's where I kind of got lucky without having an actual game plan. Because I was so
Right.
focused on the game design stuff, I was constantly learning and improving for the goal. The goal was to make a game. So I would learn all the different programming things, all the different things. I bought all the books and, I wanted to share what I had learned. And that's where I made the videos from. And I didn't go in with the intention of making a portfolio, which would have been a very smart thing, just like looking at the programming aspect earlier in my career would have been a smart thing. I wouldn't have gotten such a late start. But when I did apply for jobs, when I did decide, hey, let's give this a try, that was how I got my foot in the door when I had no actual experience because everybody else was even the people who had a couple years of experience, I was still chosen over that because they were able to see many years of experience in portfolio form, so they could see the years of working on my game, even if I didn't have professional experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I kind of wish I had heard it too. And just for everyone listening, it just shows kind of the conversation we had earlier about it being hard to get experience without previous experience. Like you can kind of do anything just to show you're interested. Like you creating this portfolio completely on your own just shows your motivation and you also learning about the topic that you want to pursue a career in. And I think that just shows the initiative too. And like to your employer, that just goes a long way along with the recommendations from your previous employer, just showing that work ethic. So it's a great combination. And then just continuing along with your portfolio, I know you really emphasized how important that was. Why exactly do you think that made such a difference for you starting out?
Well, I think a lot of programming jobs, when you do it, they will give you a little programming interview. Now, these programming interviews are usually useless because I did quite a few of these. They don't actually pertain to anything useful programming wise. They're just a list of things that you can study for, and people do it because it's very difficult to actually gauge somebody's programming skill from a conversation with them. Uh, what I can gauge your skill from, however, is looking at your portfolio. I had bigger companies that looked at my portfolio that said, I see that you've put in the work. I see that you are a beginner. You do have this, but you're not up to scratch for what we're looking for. They could genuinely tell what my skill level was by looking at. And the job that I got, they were looking for an entry level person, and I can see that you are not coming in from like out of school and like only textbook learning. You clearly know what you are doing and can apply the knowledge. And that's why they gave me the chance.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think also understanding what your strengths are personally and what role is best for you is important and just being transparent. I've been kind of going through a lot of interviews myself, just looking into different internship and full-time roles after college. And I think just really having that self-awareness is so important and it's just a great lesson to learn as early as possible. So now we discussed your kind of entry into the programming world and your first job. I know now you're one of the head programmers at your company. So, what do you think specifically helped you grow into that role? Like, was it people around you, the resources, the experience, just anything you have on that?
I think what ended up helping me the most is the fact that I might have put in the 40 hours of work getting the work done as much as I needed, but that was the bare minimum. So that was if they would able to trust they could trust me with very little because I knew very little. But the entire 40 hours was doing what I knew. And then on my off hours, I knew all the pieces that I didn't know. As in, I knew I didn't know this programming language. I didn't know this programming language, and I knew they were necessary. So I studied those in my off hours. So I might have put in 40 hours for work every week, but I put in a minimum of 20 hours extra programming every week. whether it was when I first got started for a couple years, just learning all the different languages I needed, learning all the different programming tools I needed, reading many, many books on the topic. Or afterwards, when I felt comfortable and I thought I could do my job, sufficiently, then that like 20 hours a week was dedicated to working on game design again, which doing your own project means you're learning your own stuff. So always having a learning mind, I think, was extremely useful.
Yeah, I think lifelong learning is so important in every facet, like whether it's your career or just kind of learning from the experiences and people around you. I really, really appreciate you sharing your experience on that. And also, I think I've actually heard this piece of advice before, and I think it kind of sums up what you just said. Like, it's so important to know what you know, but also to know what you don't know and to constantly be looking to improve upon that. So that really wraps it up nicely, I would say. So I'm glad to hear that you've had such a great progression through your career, and I'm really excited that you were able to kind of share your career journey with us. I didn't personally know a lot about the programming world or just IT in general, so I think this will be a really great, insightful episode for our audience. And kind of just moving on to more of a reflection. So success is a big topic that we discuss on this episode. Me and Kira talked about it last time. How would you define success for yourself today, and how has that definition changed since when you were younger?
So when I was younger, I think I would have defined success just by making a game and finishing a game, which, is an accomplishment of a sorts. I've actually done that. But today, success is mostly being able to do my job sufficiently and being able to have a stable job to pay for the bills. Like I said, I did actually complete a game on the side once before at this point, but it didn't pay any bills. And younger me would have been like, yay, this is great. Older me is, I need to be able to pay my mortgage. So,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Your goals completely progress as you grow. And that was a big topic that we talked about last time. So I think that's helpful for students to hear, just understanding the progression. And I know when I was in high school, it wasn't too long ago, but I still can see how my motivations and just kind of things that I was really striving to achieve has changed so much. So it's kind of interesting to reflect back on. Just keep continuing along with that, since our audience is mostly students. What is something that you wish that someone told you when you were 17 or just in high school in general?
so embarrassingly, I can't say too much for this because I was told everything when I was a kid and I just ignored it.
That's fair.
I was told by my guidance counselor as a kid when I was looking at different colleges to go to that this is the college I should go to because it was the best at programming and I could, even if the game design doesn't work, I would be able to venture it. I didn't listen to them and I went to a game design college that ended up just being completely fraud, didn't teach you anything, and just took all your money. uh, Other advice I was given was to basically just make lots of connections and hold them. That way, if other people got jobs places, they would be able to, help me get the jobs places. And I did not listen to that either. I just focused on me and my learning. The only thing I can say I did good is the fact that I was so focused on learning the game design that I put in the hours that I needed. And that is one thing I'd say I did correctly, and I would suggest, continuing to do for anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone also is different on their paths, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with these episodes. And of course, the hard work ethic is just clearly shown in the progression that you have made. And I think that is such an important lesson in itself. And I do appreciate you being so honest with you having those resources and advice and maybe not necessarily taking them. But of course, it's so hard to know what you want and what is going to happen 1, 2, 3, or 5 years. Like, you really don't know what's going to happen next. So I think for students listening, really embrace the network and resources around you. And of course, like, taking the advice, I'm taking every little thing that people tell you, but have that support system around you and really kind of listen and hear what they're saying, and then kind of continue making those decisions for yourself. And it'll all work out, because obviously you said you didn't take all this advice, but you went on this path and it seems like the perfect opportunity and outcome for you. So I'm really, really excited for you and love hearing that too. So just a lesson, everyone's different, and just kind of soak it all in and just take what resonates, I guess. But that's good advice too. And then kind of going along specifically to your situation, what would you say to a student who doesn't see their dream class offered at their school?
Don't worry about it. Figure out what you need to learn and teach yourself. Nothing is going to replace self-motivation. The self-motivation, the self-taught person is going to be a significantly better programmer, a better whatever it is, than the person who was taught through a class. It's not that there's anything wrong with the class itself. It's that the drive to learn is going to push you further than anybody else is going to push you. You need to push yourself more than anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And you really showed that with all of the experiences you had in high school. So I think it's a great lesson. I do wish I had heard as a high school student, but I think all the students listening will really appreciate that. And kind of just to wrap it up, the title of the podcast is Now What? We're looking ahead. We're kind of taking things step by step and kind of understanding what to do as a progression. So if you had to finish the sentence, now what I know is, how would you finish that?
Now, what I know is it's extremely important to have a passion and focus on it very heavily, practice and try your hardest. It's also important to look at secondary options. It's one thing I didn't do, and that's why I got such a late start, is so narrowly focused on the game design that I just got lucky that I developed the programming skills in the process. I didn't have a secondary plan of how I could transition. It just by chance.
Well, yeah, there's so many things that go into it. Of course, like luck is always a factor in career things, but just setting yourself up well with your education and the things that you're doing on a daily basis to kind of implement that hard work and that work ethic is just so essential, I think, to any student listening. So I really appreciate all of that. And I think that was all the questions I had for you. That was just incredible advice. And I have said this, but I think the students will really get a lot out of this episode. So thank you so much for being here today, Tim. And I appreciate it and all of your advice.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I think we'll just wrap this episode up with just kind of one more idea. Just understanding that there's so many roads that you can take as a student and an early career professional, and the road less traveled is not necessarily better or worse than any other road, but just understanding your own passions and what's right for you is so important. So students listening, just continue kind of soaking up all of your learning. We have really great resources on Lifehouse's website to ensure that you understand yourself, your strengths, your passions. So continue using those if you can, and keep listening because we have a lot of awesome episodes coming up. But thank you all for being here today.